Hey kids, howdy and welcome. It is time again for Conscious Embodiment, Astrology and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. Zoe and I are here. It's the middle of June. This is the episode for June 16th through the 22nd. It's probably the easiest week of the month. So
okay, right on,
like
of the hot summer.
Weeks. Well, yeah, right. Hot summer's starting in July when Uranus moves into Gemini. That's going to be something I'm definitely anticipating that in a big way. But the week is quiet compared to that mutable full moon that we had last week squaring the nodes. It was so interesting to watch social media sort of explode into how crazy and anxious everybody was, even though the transits weren't so crazy and anxious making in the way that typically would result in that language, but the mutability, all of the shape-shifting left all of us feeling, I think, a little lost because we were being shoved through the Play-Doh, fun factory, and we're not in that kind of a state this week. Perfect week for my new class to start. My next class is this Saturday. It's Healing Your Anxious Attachment. I talked about it in sort of great length last week. So I won't go into as much like that, but I love this class because it's one of those classes I feel born to teach. I've been avoiding it for years, but then something occurred in my experience in 2022 that allowed me to get the insight needed to teach this class. And it's basically a little bit of a shadow exploration in terms of your relationship dynamics, working with the attachment style that is yours, and finding a kind of healing approach through what is ultimately inner child work to come to a place of greater freedom in all of your relationships. If that sounds good to you, check out my class, Healing Your Anxious Attachment. Go to michaellennox.com. It starts this Saturday. I got a question from Grace this week, and I liked it. I like all questions, but it grabbed me, so here it is. Grace writes, I am a weekly listener of the podcast, but I also see the videos you do each day, most days. And the other day I heard you talk about how there had been no water in the atmosphere, and that was not great. That made me think about something I know about my natal chart. I have no planets in water signs. Does that make me emotionally detached? I mean, I'm not the most emotional person, but I don't think I am not connected to my emotions. Can you help me understand this absence of water in my chart? So first and foremost, everybody has water in their chart because there are 3 water signs, and each of those signs will rule one of the houses in your natal chart. So each house sort of represents a different area of life. And whatever house and area of life is ruled by Cancer, Scorpio, or Pisces will be where your greatest emotionality will be sort of expressed. Now, Grace doesn't say this, but built into her words are like someone gave her some bad astrology as a kind of truth. And then it lands in her as true, but confusing and bothersome because it's not true. It's not automatic that if you have no planets in water, you will be emotionally detached. Only emotionally detached people are detached emotionally. Right? The planets can't make that occur, though it's probably accurate that someone with less water in terms of planets carrying water might have an experience of less emotionality than that one, or might have to grow into their emotions in some way. but it doesn't like have a specific meaning. Like, it reminds me of when we were kids and it was like, you can't go swimming for 45 minutes after you eat because you will drown. Not because your brain is using, or your stomach is using the blood and the limbs won't have blood and you won't swim as well. And you might be tired, which is what the truth is. So it's the same thing here. People get a piece of astrology and they say, well, what does that mean? Grace, how would I know? But I can ask you, how would you describe your emotionality? Which she does a little bit in her email, right? This is a message for anybody out there in astrology. When you learn something new about your chart and your impulse is to say, well, what does that mean? Stop that. Look at what the archetypal setup is that you've just learned and ask yourself, how do I already recognize that this theme is part of me? Because sometimes that'll happen. People get some information and think, oh, this must mean something. It's like, but if you're like 35 years old, you know who you are better than some astrological piece of information.
Yeah.
Shouldn't make you question everything about who you are. Then further to this, people can have emotional setups where they're wildly emotional, like I am, but I didn't come into it until my 40s and 50s because my emotional body was so shut down from my childhood that even though I had this profound water trine in my chart, I didn't come into a graceful ability to hold that until I was, older and had emotional maturity enough. That's not reflected in my chart. It's reflected that I have a lot of emotionality. And then I can tell the story of how it played out in my life, but it's not promised in the chart. What's promised in the chart is a profound connection to the feminine energy of spirit and the great mother through emotional connections in this grand water trine that's in my chart. So Grace, go back to the information as it was presented to you. Look at your chart for the houses that are ruled by Cancer, Scorpio, or Pisces, and then answer your own question for yourself through the lens of who you know yourself to be. I suppose the big news of the week is the summer solstice on the 20th. But outside of that major marker moment in our astrological year, which is, a big deal, the biggest deal for my money is that tomorrow Mars is moving into Virgo. This is great for two reasons. One is Mars in Virgo is hearty and healthy and fabulous for our physical movement through the world. Virgo, ruled by both Mercury and Chiron, is a mansion of precision and putting things together in their proper place. Because Mars rules the physical body, there's a healthy sensibility of having the planet of our physical experience in the sign of, caring for all of the moving parts. So anytime Mars is in Virgo, it's like time to get into the details, both of what your physical body needs, but anything we're working on that looks like a project or a goal or a thing that's being created in form, Mars consciousness, we are about to get down to some real detailed work and putting it all together. Mars in Leo helps us sort of center ourselves and get out there in extroverted, creative ways. And then it's like the sensibility says, okay, now that I've sort of flown my creative flag for the moment and upped my ante of being, powerfully expressive by centering self, now we get down to work. Now we put in the details. Now we have all of the energy we might need for building stuff this year for the next 6 weeks in a kind of detailed way. Now that would be the end of the Mars segment if Mars hadn't just spent 7,000 years in Cancer and Leo. Because Mars has been retrograde, that when he does something new or interacts with other planets, he brings his retrograde consciousness with him. I've talked about this a lot. When Venus went retrograde, 2 years ago, I talked about Venus's movement for the whole year after, and I'm going to be doing that the same with all 3 of the personal planets. And this movement of Mars into Virgo after a deep exploration of learning to center in Leo, but going back to Cancer to understand there's got to be a balance between what your outside world needs are and your inner world needs are. You got to care for the body or it won't go as far. Sometimes people are so impulsive with their creative desires, they forget about preparation. That's a Cancer concept. Cancer is memory and preparation and ancestors. That's another thing. We walk through our lives supported by our ancestors, but if you don't have any energetic connection to that, you can't make anything out of that support. Mars in Cancer connects to the ancestors because they are available to us through the Cancer mansion. So I find it very elegant then what Mars is doing this week. By entering Virgo, he changes the lens through which he is operating, and we are in this healing sensibility. Jupiter has just moved into Cancer, where he's exalted, and the first thing that Mars will do when he moves into Virgo is sextile Jupiter. So as we move through the first 3 days of this week, we're experiencing a kind of tremendous, hopeful sense of expansion, Jupiter in Cancer, well supported by our feeling like we can do it, we can handle it, we have the energy, Mars in Virgo. Sextiles potential only if you're not paying attention to what brings you joy and wanting more of it. If you're not paying attention to making sure your body gets what it needs so it can support you in delivering the yummy things you want life to bring, you won't experience it. So the depressed person who's not paying attention to their life will stay depressed, but the person who is ready to get moving again and feel hopeful, the energy is available Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And then sort of like Tuesday, Wednesday through Friday, Mars is going to hit Saturn, Neptune, and Pluto in the inconjunct, the great eliminator angle that you all know I love so much, right? Because if Mars has just been through a process, then after the process, he kind of delivers us the bounty and the reward early in the week, even if that reward is just hope. What then Mars does for the rest of the week says, all right, you need to change the track that you're on with your body to help and assist what's possible in terms of your efficacy and power down the line. And in conjunct to Saturn says, if you're not doing the right thing by your body, if you're not being responsible to all of your work, you won't make it. So get on the track of discipline, responsibility. So says Saturn. And in conjunct from Mars to Neptune, says if you don't bring your spiritual practice with you and align your body with the motivating and intuitive support from the God consciousness that Neptune offers, and how are you going to make it through a world that's burning while you're trying to get on a new track to create something new? And finally, the inconjunct on Friday from Mars to Pluto is about making sure that you know who's powerful, and it's you. So Pluto holds power, Mars and Pluto together, which, they relate. Mars is the lower octave of the body, and Pluto is the higher octave of the body, bringing death, which is how we have life. We have life because the body dies. So when we're in our power struggles, and those power struggles lead to breakdowns and challenges, that's because Mars and Pluto are probably somewhere in the room. Mars and Pluto squared each other not too many months ago, and lots of shit fell apart. So Mars in conjuncting Pluto, the great eliminator track change, says stop fighting with your shadow, like Peter Pan shadow, not psychological shadow. Stop boxing with the air. when you are imagining all sorts of disempowerment and people in your way. This in conjunct says, let your power struggles stay behind as you enter this new powerful path of making things out in the world. And this makes me want to say have at it, even though we're not done with the podcast. Now, if only Jupiter wasn't squaring Neptune, right smack and dab in the middle of everything that I just described with Mars. So I want you to understand that if you think about the last segment on the podcast and you put what I shared with you in context for your own project and goals in life and things that are happening for you right now and therefore this week, Jupiter in Cancer is bumping into Neptune in the early degrees of Aries. Now, this is only going to happen once, but on Wednesday, Jupiter's going to square Neptune. Now, Jupiter only wants our expansion and abundance, and there's a sort of a saying in astrology that says there can be no such thing as a bad Jupiter transit. So keep that in mind for a second. And then, Neptune has a shadow of confusion, but the planet connects us to spirit and therefore intuitive flow and energetic support. And I just mentioned the ancestors. So everything that is invisible and supportive comes from Neptune. Mm-hmm. His one shadow is confusion, uncertainty, falling prey to deceit, not seeing things for how they really are. And my favorite one is he's just not that into you. But even when Neptune is expressing his shadow of confusion, it's not random and it doesn't lack purpose. It's for the ability to push past things unseen and have faith, even when you're blocked by clouds. Jupiter is still moving through the first degrees of Cancer saying, hip, hip, hooray, I love it here. What can we make? Let's have a party. But there's almost like we have this initiation where Neptune says, slow down. Your plans are going to change. You don't really know what's going to happen next. You're not quite in charge. And in the idea, this is Neptune still speaking, and in the idea that you're, creating your life with spirit in sort of collaboration, I'm not going to tell you much for a little while.
So you're still the IDK in
Well, I would say it like this, though. In the spirit of what I said earlier when I say, don't ask me what it means, hear what the archetype is and ask yourself what it means.
Yes.
Because you have more information than I could possibly have. Same thing here. Use your narrative in your life as you hear this and just have the consideration of what are the things you're looking to push out into the world and what confusions or limitations are you experiencing in the week ahead. And there might be some interesting information for you. There might be some interesting dreams that sort of give you some information about where you're not feeling quite centered and connected. There's nothing terrible about this transit. It's just something I think we need to know about because Jupiter is in new territory and it's a particularly happy territory for him to be in. So as we enter the woohoo, it's time to create, we also have to move through some kind of confusion clearing up. And I won't know what that is for you, but you will as you move through the week. So I hope you have good plans for Friday night because it's celebration time. It's the summer solstice. At 6:42 p.m. Pacific time, Friday evening, the sun will cross over into the 0 degrees of Cancer. It's the most light, the longest days and the shortest nights in the Northern Hemisphere. Opposite down south, they're in the shortest day and they're winter while we are in our expansion up here. The solstices and the equinoxes are marker moments, right? They're not transits. They're not two bodies interacting with each other in a geometrical form. It's just the sun and our movement around the sun, which in astrology, we express it as the sun doing the moving, but there's no third body to bring into the picture. And when there is, that's a transit. When it's two bodies that are hitting us from different angles, that's a transit. We feel that as either an event maker or a feeling expander. And the solstices and the equinoxes are just like marker moments. If you weren't looking up at the sky every day at the same time, you wouldn't know that the sun has come down in the sky and is going to now stay. Well, actually, I should say it this way. It's going up in the sky because it's summer solstice, and it'll stay there for 3 days when it will then appear to start moving downward as we inch towards winter.
I just feel like it's too early for that.
Sorry, I said winter. That won't happen for 6 months after. Okay. I'm so sorry.
I'm like, this is starting to stress me out. Summer hasn't even started. It's just, we're already reaching our peak.
Listen, the movement of the sun was interesting to our forebears. I talk a lot about the fact that the happy accidents here are partly why we have life and civilization. One of those happy accidents is something hit us billions of years ago and knocked the Earth on a 23-degree angle tilt. And that tilt is what has the sun stronger at certain times and weaker at certain times during the year. And as our ancestors looked up, they would be able to use that, the sun is coming down, 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 or it's going up, 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 up. And we know that when it's up full, that's the harvest time, that's the expansion time, and then when it starts to move down and goes into winter, that's when we are in the sort of paucity and waiting for spring. But before we got smart about it, people would have looked up and said, oh, look, it's so high, it's so high, it's so beautiful, and then it'd be like, oh, fuck. It's moving down. Yeah. Oh, no. And then 6 months later, it would be like, what's happening? It's disappearing. And this is the 3-day piece is why we have 3-day resurrections, the idea of Christmas. And that pagan moment is when we go into the death and darkness of the time, and then we watch the light return after 3 days. And so there are religious mythologies that include the same idea that the light dies for 3 days and then ascends. Well, that's just the Christ story around the winter solstice in the north. So it's easy to talk about the ritualistic value of the winter solstice because it's a moment when it appears to be that there is no light, so that we create that light ritualistically, symbolically. We light candles. We put lights on trees to make them look like they're fruiting and abundant when it's, winter. So I joke that in the summer solstice, we should all be doing shadow rituals, that when we're basking in the light, we want to not forget about the power and the need for that tension of opposites to hold the other side of things. Now, one way I get this in my consciousness now is one of the ways that we get to feel balance and harmony in the solstice moments is we have to think globally. At the equinoxes, days and nights are of equal length for both semesters, both hemispheres. I don't know why I was going to say semesters for hemispheres. But in the solstices and on either side of the astrological year, the balance comes when we realize it's the longest day up here and the shortest day in a place where we also dwell as a human collective. I like the idea of saying a prayer at the summer solstice that acknowledges that though the world sometimes feels out of balance in its actual expression, we are whole and complete always, even when it seems that that is not so. So while we are in this basking of light, I remember the shadow through which a relationship with allows me to feel light more abundantly. And so it is. I just wanted to say a little something about the upcoming weekend. I don't usually talk about something that's passing like this, partly because that's what my daily subscription is for. Subscribe to the emails, and I talk about this stuff in detail in written form. And then, my Red Robe Astrology videos talk about this. But this was just interesting to me that the sun in a new mansion is going to square Saturn in a new mansion. Right? So this is the first time our conscious awareness is bumping up against Saturn in a new sign. That's worthy of being aware of, right? Because Saturn in Aries is going to be different than Saturn in Pisces. Saturn in Pisces would have been much more concerned about our connections and the collective and sort of being not in your body enough to get things, done. Saturn in Aries is really all about how are you starting things up and moving powerfully out into the world. And there will be some lessons. And you can sort of say, in a loose binary, Saturn and Aries will be teaching the people who aren't moving fast enough to get in gear, get moving, it's time. And those who are too fast, who move impulsively, where that's not helpful, Saturn might be teaching some lessons around not getting yourself all fired up if it leads you into the brick wall. So the sun and Saturn are squaring each other on Sunday, and Mercury is trining the north node of the moon on Saturday. That to me spells out a weekend of brakes off, brakes on, or gas on, brakes on, however you want to put it. Saturday has a sense of the future, right?
Okay.
Mercury hitting the north node puts our perceptions in alignment with the collective movement of us and everybody. And so my sort of hope in sharing this is pay attention to how you're feeling about your future on Saturday, and then ask yourself the same question on Sunday, because what you might find is that the sense of power, possibility, and purpose that you end the week with might lead you to exactly the right lesson that the end of the weekend brings you to help you work with Saturn so that you can be more powerful in what you are offering the world, as the world needs us so badly. Have at it.
Did you know that Michael has a daily astro alert? If you enjoy hearing the weekly astrology, you might like knowing more about each day. When you subscribe for the daily astro alerts, you'll get an in-depth explanation of the day's astrology sent right to your email. Subscriptions are only $10 a month, or you can purchase the yearly subscription at the reduced price of $100. To subscribe, head over to michaellennox.com. All right, it's dream segment time. Every week, Dr. Michael will interpret dreams that are sent in via email or take a live caller. If you would like your dream interpreted on the podcast, you can go ahead and email us at dreams@michaellennox.com. Hopefully your dream will make it onto the show.
This week we have a call-in dreamer. What you dreaming?
Hey guys, I just like to say thank you for having me on. I'm gonna go ahead and read from the email that I sent you guys.
Oh, perfect.
Good afternoon. First, I'd like to say I love your podcast and the way you interpret astrology and the way you interpret dreams, of course. Thank you for the work you do.
Thank you.
You're now, welcome. I'd like to give you some background on the dream I had in mid-January. It was probably around January 14th to the 22nd. I'm not really sure why that time frame rings true to me, but it does. I had it written down, but burned the journal on May 1st since I had the filled up the pages. Anyways, on January 1st of this year, I drove down to Ormond Beach, Florida from North Carolina, where I was visiting family for New Year's. And I was visiting one of my dear friends.
This is life, right? This is this is context. Okay, good.
Yeah, like context, like right before the dream.
Perfect. Thanks. Keep going.
Yep. And I was visiting one of my dear friends from college. It was my senior year in college, and he graduated when I was a freshman back in 2022. In college, he always had the job of cracking everyone's back, like aligning everyone. He would like pick them up and like kind of cross their arms, and then he would just,
from behind and pull you up, and your spine goes clickety clack. I want to marry someone like that.
Yeah, and so he's 6'7", so when I say like everyone, I mean like everyone. Wow. He was doing this to everyone.
Yeah.
I was supposed to stay for 2 weeks when I went to Ormond to visit him, but I ended up cutting my stay very short. I left on January 4th back to Lynchburg, Virginia, where my university is. I guess you could say he and I are more than friends, and we have shared a very deep spiritual connection since we met in college. We also have shared physical intimacy, and he had asked to date me 3 times in the past, but I had declined because I felt that I still had some healing to do from past wounds. When I visited him, I thought it was time to finally be in union, but it ended in me realizing that yet again I had something to work through. And that is why I left.
Because I'm sitting here waiting for my moment to ask, like, well, why'd you leave, honey? Because I have a feeling that might be important.
So now through the next month, I went through some inner turmoil, and I worked with spirit and my dreams. Seeing him in my dreams was not out of the ordinary, since our connection is very much subconsciously linked. He also has a Pisces stellium and Moon, Venus, and Mercury, if that tells you anything.
Oh, yes.
The dream goes.
Yes. It tells me he's available for collective and empathic connection.
Also, his Pluto's in the 12th house, so.
Oh, Jesus. Okay, he's intense. Got it.
The dream goes like this. We are both in his house, standing in front of each other. Our arms are positioned in the same way. We're also standing in his living room, which is like connected to the kitchen.
Living room.
And so our arms are positioned in the same way, with our arms on our sides and bent at a 90-degree angle at our elbows. And our hands are flat out, fingers together, and thumbs facing the sky. Our hands
like spiritual jazz hands.
Well, no, like the hands looked more robotic. Like the arms looked very kind of robotic, the way that we were like standing with our arms like perfectly on our sides, and then like it was just like a very perfect.
Got it. So
angle,
robotic,
like
symmetrical, structural.
Yep, exactly.
Got it.
So where was I? Okay. Yeah, thumbs facing the sky, and then our hands were very close to each other, but not touching. Just the fingertips were like close to each other. And then we looked at each other, and he tapped my hands on the outside with an authoritative energy, and my entire spine cracked and aligned. But the crack and alignment actually happened both in the dream and in reality.
Oh,
it's
wow.
like I felt it simultaneously. Yeah.
Fabulous. Oh, God. I'm loving it.
So when I felt the crack, I felt it from like my tailbone, like all the way up to my neck. And then it was just like straight alignment. And then my eyes opened while my spine aligned, and I entered like a paralytic state similar to like sleep paralysis, where like once you wake up.
You were in sleep paralysis. I'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah, like once like you wake up, you're kind of just like trying to get out of that
trying to move,
vegetable
but you
state.
can't. Yeah.
And then as I was like laying down in bed, like trying to get myself out of stillness, where my bed was positioned, I saw something in the left corner of the room. Like I'm awake now, and it was like a dark shadow that spirited away. It looked like a cloud, like a very like not dense cloud, but very like fluffy, like you could pull it apart. And it just spirited away really quickly. It was dark, yes. And then once I got up, I was in shock at the dream and the physical experience it brought into my reality. Any input is greatly appreciated, though.
What an experience. And I would qualify this as a dream experience rather than a dream. It's a mystical dream experience. It would have been perfect in my book, Psychic Dreamer. This is exactly that kind of thing where not only did you have a mystical experience in the dream world, it might very much have connected to him energetically because of the way he was present in the dream and the way he shows up in waking life. So I'm going to start with that hypnagogic state that you ended in, just so that you understand exactly what was happening. You were in sleep paralysis. When we go into REM, the brain paralyzes the body. This is for our safety because the neofrontal cortex is going to light up while we're dreaming, and so we can't move, so we don't move. But sometimes the order doesn't match. In other words, and what happened to you was your consciousness began to wake up before the brain paralysis was released. And that's called a night terror or sleep paralysis or a hypnagogic hallucination. And the psychologists would just talk about how it's a hallucination, it's the brain just going blah, 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 but that's because of the hubris of science. What we know in the mystical world, Kayla, is that's the most sensitive place that we as humans can be to pick up the multidimensional energy that's in the room, right? Because we're always perceiving it, but can't interpret it. Our brains are too small. So when we're asleep and our consciousness isn't interfering, we can perceive these other energies. Now, the reason why I'm starting here, Kayla, is because both your story and, well, no, I guess it was your story. You talked a lot about sort of pushing intimacy away because there's some deep work you have to do. So I want to say to you, yay on the one hand, but if I was standing behind you at the cliff, I'd be pushing you off it. Right? Okay, so you're getting why I'm saying that? Like there's some measure of the avoidant, attachment person who's going like, oh, yes, I love all this intimacy, but ooh, not yet, not quite. I'm not quite ready. And it's like, that's bullshit. That's over. Your psyche is telling you that's over, and I'm telling you that's over. And I started with a hypnagogic state because I'm telling you that dark figure in the left is just a combo of your perceptions being amplified and your body being paralyzed and your sort of superconsciousness going, we can't move. That energy must be bad and dark. But like if I were standing in the corner of your psyche in that moment and I coach you to stay in the state and relax and open and you might, this is in theory, obviously, you'd be able to perceive the lightness and the fullness in the room and not necessarily that thing as a dark thing. In other words, it's not the shadow of your inability to be intimate because there are wounds you have to take care of. It's just an artifact of being in an energetic, chaotic state where you're not having a dream, honey. You're having an experience of a perfect, well, there's any number of ways to describe it. The one I'm drawn to today is a perfect imago experience. Imago is a kind of therapy for couples where they use the Latin word imago to mean that inside of each of us, there's an image of a beloved. That when we meet somebody who matches the image close enough, we choose them. And when each person does that simultaneously, we call that intimacy or connection or falling in love or starting a relationship, because if the imago doesn't match, you just sort of wave goodbye and move on. So then we can make the case that because he cracks backs in life, that you got the energetic back crack in the dream state. This is why I think his energy was present in the experience you were having rather than it being just something manufactured by your mind dreaming about him. And part of that's because it doesn't feel like a dream. Part of it, too, is the sacred position that you're in. It's almost like a mudra where you're standing in symmetry and facing each other in a non-intimate, non-longing way, but close. Here's what I mean by that. I used to do a workshop for gay men looking for a relationship, called it Love Strategies. And we'd do this thing where we'd get people lined up in pairs, and they'd cross the room, and then we'd say, play with the space and move towards each other and away from each other. And what always happens is they play with the space for about 2 seconds, and then they run towards each other and hug. Because everybody wants the longing and the physical connection. And what you dreamed of is the power of two souls in bodies sharing energy for a second and having a transformative experience, which you had as physical phenomena that relates to the in waking life object of this tall man. But I think the message is an integration moment where the work you've done to be ready and able to connect in an intimate way like this, especially if the connection also includes a deeper spiritual connection behind it, this was your initiation into a readiness for something with him that, like, you don't have my permission not to follow up and try to explore, as if I had any control over that. But you understand, I'm being cute when I say I really want you to take this experience and use it to accurately assess your current level of integration and move towards him and explore.
Wow. Thank you so much. I really enjoy that interpretation.
I'm so glad. Did you have any sense of it when you had it, or were you just sort of like holding it and remembering it and then sending it to me in hopes of something, to pop out from me?
Well, when I sent it, it was a few months after it had happened, and when I started.
That's
listening
right.
to
You
the
had it in
podcast.
January. You sent it in May. Okay.
Yeah. And then after that dream had happened, we did see each other again, and so the storyline kind of developed into something more. And
Yay.
it's still at the same point of me pulling away from the avoidant attachment that you were talking about. And so I think giving myself permission to kind of, jump into what is beautiful, and the word you use a lot that I really like is juicy part of a relationship.
Thank you. Yay. So here's how I'll wrap it up. The muscle of protecting yourself that the avoidant attachment has created, you will never lose that muscle. So you can dive in with full gusto, because you will never shoot your shot past where your avoidant parts want to keep you safe with, right? So you don't have to take care of the part of you that feels like you need to avoid it, but you do need to do some push-ups in the area of risk and vulnerability in putting yourself out there.
Gotcha. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. This is juicy and fun. Thanks, Kayla.
Thank you for listening to Conscious Embodiment, Astrology and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. You can find us on Apple Music, the iHeartRadio app, and anywhere you find your favorite shows. Head on over to michaellennox.com for information on astrology readings, the Daily Astro Alert subscription, upcoming classes, and to join the mailing list.